In the last 30 years, the game of basketball has changed quite a bit from the league I once knew, some ways for the better and in some ways for the worse. But one of the constants has been the fact that the league is ran by its superstars. Superstars who either adapted or completely revolutionized the way the game is played with their unique styles. But now my question is, how would the superstars of today's game adapt and perform within the gritty and slower paced era of the 1990s? Who are the stars who would really thrive in that instance? Today, I've narrowed my list down to 5 players who would almost certainly give the legends of the 1990s something to sweat about. First off, Demar DeRozan. This one probably comes as no surprise, as he not only had an all-star caliber year with Chicago, but DeRozan is often compared to Michael Jordan in terms of his footwork and his mid-range artistry. DeRozan loves to catch the ball in the post and go to work from there with his wide variety of post moves. Recently, he has improved quite significantly from three-point range, but throughout the vast majority of his career, he hasn't been an efficient three-point shooter, which honestly makes him even better suited to play in the 90s rather than in this modern era. Some might get upset about this next take, but let's be honest, outside of Michael Jordan, the shooting guard position in the 1990s wasn't quite the deepest position. Although there were some notable stars, rarely were they also great defensive players. And with many of those two guards being undersized, a 6'6" and offensively disciplined DeRozan would certainly take advantage of the exploitable matchups. Next up is Kyrie Irving. He's arguably the greatest ball handler in NBA history, which would certainly work well in the 1990s, where players like Tim Hardaway and Allen Iverson made names for themselves. Not only is Kyrie fundamentally sound, but back in the 90s, the referees wouldn't let players get away with as much in terms of movement and ball handling, like Euro steps, loose gather steps, and so on. As time has gone on, the game has been called less strictly, and a lot of today's highlights would be quickly called as turnovers 30 years ago. This is where Kyrie stands out, as a player like him would have the control and the ball handling skills to quickly adapt to these new obstacles. Next is the Joker, Nikola Jokic. Obviously, being at the center position in the 1990s means you'll be dealing with plenty of competition, with guys like Shaquille O'Neal, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, Hakeem Olajuwon, Dikembe Mutombo, and Alonzo Mourning as adversaries. But if there's any modern center who's well suited to take on that task, it is indeed the Joker. To be frank, the bigs of the 90s wouldn't know what to do with a center who could facilitate as well as Jokic, but who could also stretch the floor with his perimeter shooting. They're accustomed to playing a bruising and punishing style under the paint, but Jokic would force them to think in ways that they usually don't, and would naturally pull them away from their comfort zone. Jokic wouldn't just dominate on an individual level, but his skills would result in his team dominating as well. By stretching the floor with his perimeter shooting, Jokic would force the great rim protectors of that era to move towards the perimeter, which would then open up the passing lanes and the painted area, which cutting wings would exploit. And there's no better big to find and distribute to those cutters than Jokic himself, considering how he's arguably the greatest passing center of all time. The great bigs of the 90s would try to play physically with Jokic, but considering how he's a career 83% free throw shooter, he wouldn't have many problems with that either. Next is Rudy Gobert. Some of you may find this one as a surprise, but after pondering it for a while, I truly believe he would take advantage of this era with the opportunities given to him. 30 years ago, the NBA was taking roughly 1/5 of the amount of three-pointers that they're taking in today's game. As high school coaches always love to preach, long shots equals long rebounds. With more shots closer to the basket, Gobert's rim protection and rebounding skills would stand out to an even greater extent. As impressive as his rebounding and shot blocking numbers are, I would expect them to get a significant boost if he played in that era. As far as his competition, yes, he would have a difficult time going up against other legendary bigs of the 90s. But honestly, the offensive end has never been Gobert's strongest area on the court anyway, so being limited offensively wouldn't really stop him from excelling at what he's best at, which again is his defense and rebounding. Last on my list is a point guard with a lot of old school style to his game, Chris Paul. Paul is what basketball fans refer to as a true point guard, who plays a game with a style that's within rhythm of the 90s. The majority of the time, he's looking to facilitate first and score second, regardless of the fact that he's a very capable scorer. His style is slow-paced, methodical, and he loves to use plenty of pick and rolls. In the 90s, there just wasn't as much fast-break basketball, and instead, much of the offense was executed in half-court sets, which naturally suits his game as he likes to patiently quarterback the offense from the top of the key. It's also worth mentioning that there are plenty of great bigs in the 1990s, whether it be at the center position or the power forward position. Many centers and power forwards have experienced their best years in the NBA when Chris Paul was their point guard, which comes as no surprise considering how good CP3 is with the pick and roll, entry passes, and lob passes. Pair Chris Paul with almost any of these bigs, and they are both likely to have career years as a result. Again, this is analytical, but it's also a speculative topic, so I'm very curious to hear your list as well. Who are the modern players who would dominate in the 1990s? Let me know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.